Alright, so with the Skullbriar deck, a big part of its strength comes from being able to get the right creatures to perform certain functions. So next I have my tutor package, and so right now I have the best tutor in the deck. You know, it's banned in Legacy for a reason. It's Survival of the Fittest. It's a ridiculous card. You discard a creature, look for a creature, and the thing about Skullbriar is conveniently, like, you want creatures in the graveyard, so pitching them is actually, you know, to the graveyard is an advantage. So like, not only did you get to put creatures in the graveyard where they belong sometimes, you also get to get anyone you want. So it's just ridiculous. So this one of the best cards in the deck for sure. I play Fauna Shaman as well. It's basically Survival of the Fittest. It's a 2/2 creature, which, you know, has its advantages, but you can only use it once per turn. You have to wait a turn too. So it's a good card. It's just not nearly as good as Survival of the Fittest. I mean, then I have, of course, Demonic Tutor. It's pretty standard for any deck that can support it. You get to look for any card you want, get it, play it. I mean, it's any answer. Like, it only searches for creatures. It searches for anything. So it's really good. Entomb's another card. That's pretty well. So with this deck, Entomb will look for like Bloodghast, Gravecrawler, which I'll get to later on. But the real star of this deck when it comes to the graveyard is Vengevine. And not only does it work well with Entomb, but this is one of those creatures that you just want in the graveyard. You can tutor it with survival. You can start what I call the survival chain, and it involves getting Vengevine with some other creatures, Basket Rootwalla. I mean, I'll show you those cards later on when we get in the video. But Vengevine is pretty much the power behind the whole tutoring. You get to Entomb for it, put it in the graveyard. You can survival, put it in the graveyard. You can Fauna Shaman, put it in the graveyard. And if you don't already have it, well then of course these two help you look for it. So yeah, this guy's definitely an all-star. Worldly Tutor, it's a tutor. I mean, you have creatures that come good in certain situations. I hate like these kind of tutors because you have to put them on top of your deck. I'd rather just have them in my hand, but I mean, they can't be that good, I guess. And then Green Sun Zenith is a very solid tutor spell. You can only get green creatures with it, but usually it serves a lot of purposes. So it tutors for, you know, cheap cards like Tarmogoyf, or a nice trick that people sometimes don't know. But I mean, maybe people know about it, but it's a pretty cool trick. Is you get to play this on turn 1. You Green Sun Zenith for 0, and why 0, you may ask? Well, conveniently, there's a card called Dryad Arbor that technically it's 0 mana. It's a green creature, and it's a forest. So this kind of serves not only as a tutor but as mana acceleration. Yeah, so that's it for the tutoring, and we'll go ahead and get to the creature. Of course, Skullbriar is an aggressive deck, and of course, aggressive deck will probably need creatures. I guess that'd be great for an aggressive deck, right? So what I've gone over is just utility spells. These are just spells that make the deck run, but you know, the power comes from the creatures. So all the creatures are very good at Skullbriar. As I mentioned earlier, Vengevine is an all-star. Basically, what you want to tutor every time. Haste, 4/3, big body, super resilient too. Then we have Great Sable Stack. This is more of a meta call. It can be countered as protection from blue and black. So obviously, if you see a lot of those decks being played, then Sable Stack's a very good choice. I mean, it's against Vendilion and Clique especially. They actually just really can't deal with this, aside from like a Vidalcan Shackles or something. But it's a very good card. Drag Mangler, just more power. Haste, 3 mana haste guy. The Scavenge is not really relevant, but the 3 power haste, you know, if you go turn 2 Skullbriar and turn 3 Drag Mangler, that's already a pretty powerful start. We have Varels. He's a pretty resilient threat. He sacrifices creatures and scavenges off of them as well. Yeah, so like if you get, you know, Varels is one of those I'm kind of debating. I'm not sure how good he is yet. It's one of those that he just came out in Dragon's Maze a couple sets ago, or actually last set. So yeah, he's still kind of up for debate. I'm not sure how good he is. He hasn't come up in too many situations, but he seems fine in theory. Like, you know, he scavenges every creature in your graveyard, and you know, regenerating is pretty powerful. So he's a sack outlet for, you know, Skull Clamp or something. Bloodghast. Now this guy is ridiculous because, as I mentioned earlier with my card advantage suite, if you ever get Skull Clamp with Bloodghast, you literally cannot lose. It's very hard to lose from that point, because what happens is that you Skull Clamp Bloodghast, he goes to the graveyard, you draw 2 cards, then you play a land and you trigger landfall. He comes straight into play, you Skull Clamp him again, he dies, you draw 2 more cards. So by the time you know it, you have so many cards and your opponent really can't do much about it. So yeah, he's really good. It's also another good way to survival of the fittest. Like when I talk about survival chain, this is one of the cards I'm actually talking about. Is Blood Gas. He's a very good one. Gliss is okay. She's a brick wall. She also gets through anything. The first strike death touch means basically she can never die in combat. It's hard to kill her. The added value you get off of getting an artifact when a creature dies is very marginal, but she's just a very efficient attacker. That's what she is. Skin Shifter. He's a very good card too. He's basically a 2-mana 4/4. He's a beat stick. He becomes a rhino. There's a lot of cool combat tricks you can do with him. Versatility is pretty good with this guy, so I like playing Skin Shifter. Viridian Shaman. One of the cards that's really rough for this deck to beat is a card that I'm playing called Yumazawa's Jitte, and it's a very hard card to beat. As you can see, a lot of these creatures are cheap, have low power. So once the Jitte gets active, like, it's really hard to stop, and Viridian Shaman pretty much takes care of that. Now, especially with the new Legend rule now, so theoretically, if two aggro decks are going at each other, the aggro deck that wins is the first one who gets Jit active. So if you play Viridian Shaman, pop their Jit off, then you'll have the advantage. But yeah, it's basically in there for a card like Yumazawa's Jitte. It's just unbeatable if they get it going. Flashback Marauder is pretty good. It's one of those like tutor targets that I usually get. Comes into play. Each player sacrifices a creature. It's good against decks like Geist's Draft that have hexproof. As you know, you can't really target him with inner removal. So like the only way you can get him is you Diabolic Edict, or you can just play Flashback Marauder. And he's very tutorable because he's a creature. So he comes in. You sacrifice. Each player sacrifices a creature. So it's pretty decent. Lawless Troll is another addition from the Ravnica block. It's super good. Trample, Regenerator. You really don't want to pitch too many creatures to this guy, but he's a pretty good attacker. He's an aggressive card. He regenerates and stuff, so if you need to play defense, he'll do that very well too. It's okay. Mesmeric Fiend is I would probably add that to my discard suite in that range, because he comes in, he takes out their best card, and then when he dies, he gives it right back to them. So there's some cool stacking tricks you can use with this guy too. Diagraph Ghoul is one of those just early beat sticks. It's a 2/2 for 1. I mean, it's exactly what Skullbriar wants. You go like turn 1 Diagraph Ghoul into turn 2 Skullbriar. That's a pretty powerful curve. So he's just a 2/2 for 1, and I have plenty of those in this deck too. Carnophage is kind of the same thing. Also, Vampire Lacerator is the same thing. So they're kind of the same card, just with slightly different drawbacks. So there's a little bit of redundancy there. Now we have Tarmogoyf. Now, no matter what format you play this guy in, he's just an all-star. Tarmogoyf is super good. 2-drop. Most of his is 2-drop ever printed. One of the best cards ever printed. Tarmogoyf is just an insane card. In EDH, there's even more wacky stuff going on. So like, you're more likely to get Artifact, Enchantment, Planeswalker in the graveyard, and he just beats down extremely well. Love Tarmogoyf. Onus Prowler is this is a discard outlet. It's a 3/1 flyer. It's a pretty big body. There's not many flyers in the Skullbriar deck, but this one happens to be one. Them discarding a card to make it weaker actually doesn't happen as often as people think. So usually they'll just take the 3 damage and then discard a card, because also in 1v1 EDH you have more life to work with, so they're more likely to just take the 3 damage instead. But you gotta remember, it's a discard outlet, so you get to discard cards like Gravecrawler or Vengevine or other stuff, and it works pretty well with that. It's okay. Friction Revoker. There's any pesky Planeswalkers or like Yumazawa's Jitte, as I mentioned earlier. I'm serious, guys. That card is unbeatable. I keep mentioning it, but the card really is bad news for this deck. Friction Revoker will just take care of a lot of problems. It's kind of like a Poison Needle on a stick. It's very good. It's very good at what it does. So it's just in there for utility. Gravecrawler is one of those 2-power 1-mana guys. But the reason why I put Gravecrawler to the side is because, like Bloodghast, you have a lot of Skull Clamp tricks with Gravecrawler. So let's say you have Skullbriar, he's conveniently a zombie. So you Skull Clamp Gravecrawler, cast him again, because you have a zombie, and then you Skull Clamp him again, draw 2 more cards, and there's just a big old chain that happens there. It's a super good card in this deck. Skull Clamp makes the deck work really well with these guys. I also have Oven World Tracker. So as you can see, some of my guys, a lot of my guys regenerate. Like Lawless Troll regenerates if he gets pretty big. Varros regenerates as well. This guy's pretty good because he gets to make creatures fight. So when you fight with creatures that can regenerate, obviously, well, your guy regenerates and they just lose their guy. So this guy's really good against decks like Dahlia. He's really good, or any deck that relies on having small little creatures like mine. Like this card is a house. He's really good. I have Bastion Reroll. Now this card is just a 1-mana 1/1. He becomes a 3/3, but he's much more than that though. If you really look at it, he starts off what I call the survival chain, and you pitch this guy, you play him for free, get your you get your Vengevine, you pitch your Vengevine, and then you play another guy, and then the cool thing about it when you pitch him is you actually cast him, so he actually gets this he gets to meet the fulfillments for Vengevine. So discarding him, this guy's special because if you discard him, you cast him, which with Vengevine that would mean you only need one more creature to cast, and he comes straight from the graveyard ready to attack. So this guy is an important part of that chain I was talking about. Strangled Geist, nothing special, just a 2/1 haste guy. He's resilient to board sweeper, so the Undying comes in pretty handy. Also works well with this card. I mean, I think every card in this deck works well with this card, so it's really good. Petri Leech, 2-mana 4/4 guy. The life loss is negligible because you're usually the beatdown, so yeah, you're just happy to have this guy on turn 2. He's, if you don't Skullbriar turn 2, like this is a good turn 2 play as well. Scavenging Ooze, as I call the best card from M14. One of the best cards in Modern, like overnight. It's just a super good card. It's actually good against this deck, which is kind of ironic, but the deck runs it because it's just that powerful. Against other creature decks, it gets really big. You can even start exiling your own stuff, and you can keep gaining life, putting counters on this guy. This guy's just really good. Blood Scrivener, he's like kind of a Dark Confidant, except not nearly as good. But if you're running low on cards, which I mentioned earlier, Skullbriar tends to just run out all of his cards pretty fast. Blood Scrivener does a good job of making sure you refill on cards pretty soon. I have Thrun, 4-mana 4/4 regenerates, can be countered, hexproof, so he's perfect basically for this deck. He's at the higher end of the curve. As you notice, a lot of my creatures, or a lot of my spells in general, cost 3 or less. This guy costs 4, but he's completely worth it. The cards are just really good. Creekwood Liege, it's kind of a glorious anthem, or it's an anthem effect basically for your creatures. It's kind of an anthem and a bitter blossom in one card. So yeah, this card is super powerful because not only do you guys get bigger, but then you get guys at the beginning of your upkeep, and it's really good. And then we have Carrion Feeder also. Carrion Feeder is a sack outlet, and there's some really cool tricks you can do with Gravecrawler. For example, you can sacrifice him to Carrion Feeder. Carrion Feeder is a zombie, so you sacrifice him, put a +1 counter on Carrion Feeder, and then Gravecrawler, you can just cast them, keep casting them multiple times, and it just keeps coming back. So those are my creatures, and I guess real briefly, I didn't mention these earlier, but you have cards like Unearth. It's just a value card. You can cycle it, which is good if it's useless, or you can just get back one of your cheap efficient creatures. You can get back your Dark Confidant, you can get back Tarmogoyf straight into play, and it's really good. Rancor is good at getting the beats on. So like I said, this deck pushes fast and early. Rancor is perfect at doing that. It's always just as good as it was back then as it is now. And Yumazawa's Jitte, I mean, card's just good. Like I said, Jitte Skull Clamp are the best 2 equipment ever printed, and this one's it's a close second. This card's really good. It does everything: kills creatures, make your creatures bigger, and it gains you life. So it's a really good card in general. And that's it for the spells, and I guess I'll briefly go over the lands next.